In this video, we're going to pick up where we had left off. We had diagnosed the problem, we had cleaned the engine, we'd ordered a new crank, and we were getting ready to reassemble the engine. So stick with me and I'll show you the entire assembly process, and we will have a fire up at the end. So stay tuned. All right, we got the motor flipped back over. It's about as clean as it's going to be. I went ahead and I cleaned off my mating surface from my oil pan there and cleaned out all the gunk from the holes there. So yeah, she's pretty clean. I did go ahead and I sprayed it down with a light coating of a protectant, just because it is pretty humid out here and I don't want things to rust as I'm working on it. But I just sprayed her down to protect her a little bit. So what's our next step? Well, now we need to go through the painstaking task of checking all of our bearing clearances with the new crank and the new bearings they sent in. So I've got everything laid out here. So my old crank was a 10 under crank. This is a 30 under crank according to the bearings that I got. Let me see if we can pull one out here and show you quick. Right, focus, right there, 30 under. So we're going to go ahead and take our measurements on all of our journals here and write them down. And then we're going to have to go ahead and torque up our mains and our rods there to check the clearances. So I'll show you how to do that, but I'll give you a preview right here. So you're supposed to use a micrometer. I don't have one, so I got to work with what I got. I got a caliper, right? I've used it before in the past for smaller engines, so it's worked there. So hopefully it'll be okay here. To check the bore, you're supposed to have a bore mic. I also don't have one of those. I have bore gauges, which they telescope in and out, and then you can lock them in place. So you fit them into the bore, let the spring tension out so it expands, lock it in place, pull it out, and then you take a measurement across with your caliper. So that's how that works. So I have to measure up all my journals, and I have to measure up all of my rods once they're torqued back together, and my mains once they're torqued back together. So let me get myself set up here and I'll show you how I'm going to do a couple of these. So stay tuned. All right, we're set up. So I've got my caliper here. I want to make sure to zero it before each measurement I take, and I can take my measurement. Then we'll zero it again. I have a box laid out here where I've got all my mains written down and all of my rod journals labeled so I can keep track of which one's which. So I've already done the first one, so 4.465 is what I measured for my number one main here. So I'm going to work my way down. I'm going to do the mains first, then I'll do all of the rods. So I'll just show you how I'm going to do my main. So I take measurements in two directions, so I basically come in this way and that way and take the measurement. So when I'm doing it, I'm making sure that, I can just show you here on number one again, but making sure that I'm not over any of the oil galleys, and I'm making sure that this is laying, the bar here is laying flat on the surface there, and I'm not cocking it, so I'm just trying to get it as straight as I can as I'm taking my measurement. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do my number two. Hopefully you'll be able to see how I'm doing that and work my way down. But here's number two. Again, get it set so that we're parallel. So try to get it in a stable position. So I'm getting, come on. It is a lot easier to do this with a micrometer, but I don't have one. I'm probably gonna have to invest, but here's where we're at. All right, so we got 2.462. 2.462 in that direction. So I'm gonna go ahead and write that down. 2.462. Now I'm gonna go in the other direction. I'm gonna go to this side so I can see it. Doesn't really matter if you guys can see it or not, but again, get her parallel. See if I can read that. .465. Nope, 2.4615. Okay, So that's the procedure I'm going to use all the way down, and I'm going to do the same thing with the rods, except for the rods I'm going to take it in two places because you have obviously two rods on one journal there. So I'm going to go ahead and get all my measurements, and then I'll take you back. You don't need to see me do the whole thing. All right, I just wanted to show you this before I moved on to the rods, but I'm pretty much at 2.4665 or 2.467, you know, all the way along there. So pretty consistent. So I redid that measurement because it just didn't seem right to me. So once I did it again, I was closer to what I was everywhere else. So now I'm going to go ahead and work on the rods. So I'll bring you back. All right, I got all my rod measurements now too. Everything was pretty consistent except for number 8 there when you went, well, 7 and 8, when you went vertically this way, it was a lot bigger than when you went horizontally. So we've got a bit of an egg shape on there, it seems like. So I'm gonna have to see how that plays out here, but I'll get us set up for the next part, so stay tuned. All right, I got you set up here. So what we're gonna do, like I said, is we're going to set our main bearings in there and torque them down with the caps without the crank in there and take measurements of where we're at. So how are we going to do that? Well, got our bearings. Remember this bearing with the hole in it points toward the galley here, right? There's a notch here, or a protrusion on that bearing. There's a notch right here. So this bearing sits down in that notch right like that, right? Same thing goes for the cap. There's a notch there. There's a notch in this bearing. So we're going to go ahead and set that there. Get her pushed down so she's in the notch. Whoop, drop the bolt. We'll clean it up and pick it up in a second, okay? Now, which way does the cap go? Hopefully you can see that, but there's an arrow on there that points towards the front. Also, another way to look at this is, dropping all my bolts here, the notches go on the same side. So this notch goes on the same side over here. So let me go ahead and get my bolts picked back up here and cleaned up. I'll bring you back and I'll show you how we're going to torque this. All right, I've got all of my caps set in there and snug down. So a couple points here. You don't need to use any lubrication on the bearings at this point. Not necessary, but what I did do is on each bolt, before I put it in, I put a dab of 3-in-1 oil or any other light oil will work. That way, you know, down the shaft and down the threads. That way, there's no binding or less binding on the threads inside there. So it's gonna make your torque specs a lot more accurate. Another thing, the caps are tight fitting in here. So once you get them snugged down, give them a whack with a dead blow hammer to get them seated properly. Also, I tighten the bolts all down by hand to make sure that there's no binding in there as they're going in and coming out. So that way I know that I have no debris in there and my torque specs are going to be accurate. So now let's get to torquing. So 1 through 4 go up to 80 foot-pounds. Number 5 goes up to 120 foot-pounds. And we're going to torque them in a 3-step sequence. So I'm going to do these 4 first and do this one last, but I'm going to go 60, 70, 80. So I've got my torque wrench set at 60 pounds here. And I'm going to go ahead and torque these down. Now, when you actually have the crank in there, you're supposed to go from the inside out. I don't have the crank in there, obviously, so it doesn't really much matter. So I'm just going to go from one end to the other, and, you know, do them all. So I'm going to start off with my 60. Do both sides evenly. Okay, that one's at 60. At 60. Yep. Yep. All right, moving on. $60, $60. Snug it up again. $60, $60. Okay. Okay, we're at 60. $60, $60, $60. There we go. Okay. I'm actually going to get out my big torque wrench. That was a little bit easier on myself, so stay tuned. I'll be right back. All right, we got the big boy now. I've torqued it up to 70 foot-pounds. So I'm going to repeat the same sequence all the way across. All right. 70, 70, 70, 70, 70, 70, 70. Okay, now I'll take it up to 80. Let's reset here. 75, 80. All right, same sequence. Oh boy. 80. 80. Okay, those are done. Now, these go to 120, so I'm going to go 100, 110, 120. So I'm going to raise this up to 100. All right, here we go. Okay, go up to 110. 110. And 120. Okay. Okay, now everything's torqued. Let me go ahead and get my gauges and I will show you how we're going to take our measurements. So stay tuned. All right, so these gauges go in intervals here, right? So I selected the one that goes from 2 1/8 to 3 1/2 because I'm measuring roughly 2 1/2 inches here. All right, so again, these work. These are spring loaded, and there's a dial here that you turn to lock them in place, right? So hopefully you can see this, but we're going to go in number 1 here. And we're going to fit it inside with the spring pressure. Okay. Now you got to try to find a happy spot in there, right? So you want, I'm trying to go as vertical, straight up and down as I can. And I'm trying to find a nice resting spot so that I'm straight up and down this way and this way, right? Then I go ahead and I lock it, carefully slide it out. So now that should be the inner measurement of my called bore there, right? So now I'm going to take my caliper, turn it on, zero it. Hopefully I can do this on camera, but now we take our caliper, slide it open, slide my gauge, whoops, in here. Got to get it centered. So something to note too, these are a little bit radius down here. I don't know if you can see that on camera or not, but the ends are a little bit radius, they're rounded, so it's going to be tough to find that middle point here, but just got to be patient and work at it. Find what that medium says. Whoop. And we are roughly, come on, 2.468. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down. Then I'm going to go ahead and do the rest. So now what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take each cap off as I go to make it easier to take the measurements from one side. So I'm going to take number 1 off, do number 2, and move on, get all my measurements, and I'll show you where we're at the end. So stay tuned. All right, consulting our book here, you can see I made 2 dash marks there. So for bearings 1, 2, 3, and 4, we need no more than 2.1 thousandths clearance. And for number 5, you need no more than 3.1 thousandths clearance. So when you do the math up here, from what I laid out, we're actually in pretty good shape. I rechecked these, that's why there's stuff crossed out here. But so number 1, we're at about 1 thou here, 1 thou here, and we're at 2 thou here. So we're within our tolerance on all of our rods. I'm sorry, on all of our mains. Now we have to repeat the same procedure with the rods. It's going to be a little bit tougher because there's 8 of them, but I'll go ahead and get set up and show you how to do that. All right, guys, here we are. We're going to start assembling our rods and rod bearings. So here's the rod bearings. There's no top and bottom. They're identical on both halves. They have those same notches. Focus, like we do on the main bearings, and we have the same notches in our cap and our rod. Okay, so again, you want to line your notches up when you're putting the cap on the rod. Again, the notches, whoops, there we go. The notch side goes on the same side. Also, there's a feature on here. So you see here, there's this little, call it a protrusion on the casting there. You have the same round protrusion right here. So when you're putting these together, it's a foolproof way to make sure that they line up. If that doesn't line up, that means you're backwards, right? So that's how we're going to do it. Now, let's talk about how we're going to take how we're going to torque these down and take our measurements. So I've already torqued down number 1, just a proof of concept. So this is definitely not the right way to do this, but this is the way I'm going to do this. So I figured out if I take a C-clamp here and I clamp on the side of the rod down here, so it's not touching the bearing, and it's not touching the mating surface there, I can do my torquing right here, and the rod doesn't move rather than pulling the piston out. We're going to do this in the same type of 3-step process that we did for the mains. These go up to 42 foot-pounds, so we're going to go 22, 32, 42, okay? So I'll set you up on the tripod and show you how I'm going to do this one. So hold on 1 second. All right, here we go. Got my torque wrench set to 22 foot-pounds. I'm going to go ahead and torque these. Now it does help to hang on to the C-clamp while you're doing this, just to help keep it steady. Okay, 22. Now we'll loosen her up, go to 32. 30, 32. Tighten down our lock nut. Okay, now we'll go to 42. 35, 40, and 2. Okay, so I got 2 done. Now I'm going to go through, do the other 6, and I'll bring you back and I'll show you how we're going to take our measurements. Stay tuned. One thing I failed to mention, just like with the mains, I put a little dab of light oil right around here and on the threads just to make sure that there was no binding when the nut torques down on the rod bolts there. So just a little tip to help you get more accurate torque readings. All right, I have all my rods torqued up with the bearings in there. Now I'm going to go ahead and take my measurements. I'm going to do the same thing as before, except I selected a different gauge. This one goes up to a 2 1/8, and I'm measuring roughly 2 inches, maybe a little bit more. So this one should work. I'm going to do the same thing. Stick the gauge in there, then take my caliper, take my measurement, write her down, do the math, and see how my clearances are. So I will tell you the results. All right, here's where we're at. We're at the max allowable here, so 2.5. Here we're actually at 4, so we're actually a little on the loose side here. We're good all the way across here. Pretty much everything is at the max tolerance except for that one. That one's good, that one's low, and this one's actually at the very bottom end of the tolerance, but it's still actually within tolerance. So I've only got this one, whoop, there we are, that's out. Could be part of my measurement, but even if it's a little loose, you know what? I don't really care. So it's 1 out of 7 or 1 out of 8. Okay, so I'm going to call that good. Next step, we can actually begin assembly. First thing we got to do though is we got to put in our end seals on the block and on some of the caps here. So let me get that laid out and I'll bring you back. Alright, so what we're going to do here is get our rear main seal all set up. So when I took this engine apart, it actually had the rope style seal here, like you see here. Reading online, talking to different people, they actually recommend using the Felpro, I guess it's neoprene or some sort of a rubberized seal in here. And actually they say the one from a 460 Ford works great in here because they have the same sealing surface. So that's what I got. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to show you how I'm going to do this. It's going to be hard to do with one hand, but I'll give you the general idea. So you can see here, there's this lip, this indent here. That needs to go on the inside, so facing the front of the engine, okay? So the idea there is when oil pressure builds, it catches that lip and it pushes it against the crank to help make a sealing surface. So make sure that's facing in. So now when you put this, see that this actually drops in there really nice and easy. When you put this in here, you want to have the ends offset from the parting line of the engine here. So they say 3/8 of an inch. So I've got a 3/8 inch drill bit laying here. It's tough to do with one hand, but there. So I'm going to lay that drill bit there and level it out like that. So that's basically how it goes in there. Now, also, I'm going to do this off camera, but they want you to put some gray RTV down on the back edge of this, down inside and on the back edge to help make a really nice, good seal here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on the cap and on the block itself, and then I'll bring you back for the next step. Okay, rear main is ready to go. Letting that RTV set up a little bit before I put the crank in. But now we're about ready to put the crank in. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a healthy dose of assembly lube on all the rod bearings and all the main bearings. I'm using this Lucas High Performance. It contains zinc, things like that. So we're going to slop that up really good, give it a good healthy dose so that we don't have any sort of a dry fire issue once we actually do spin this thing over, crank it up. So I'm going to go ahead and lube up all the bearings. Going to be a little bit of a wrestling match getting the crank in there since I do have the pistons in there already, but just have to take my time, make sure I'm not dinging anything up, and yeah, we'll get it in there. I'll show you once it's in there before I start tightening up the caps. All right, crank is in. Yeah, it was a wrestling match, but I did it. I use these bungees to help hold the pistons up, hold the rods up, I guess, while I was trying to get things finagled, and just took my time. And I have all the spark plugs out so I can move the pistons up and down. So I just went journal by journal and adjusted things as I needed to be, up, down, until I got them all to fall into place. So everything's good. I double checked all of my bearings to make sure they're where they're supposed to be. So it looks like they are. Now it's time to go. I'm going to put my caps on. I'm going to start with my rear back here just to make sure my seals are lined up to where they need to be. So go slow, and then I'm going to go ahead and start torquing everything down. So I'm going to start with the middle and then work my way out using the same 3-step process as before. So I'm trying to remember what my numbers were. I think yep. So 1 through 4 go up to 80 pounds. Number 5 goes up to 120. So for these 4, I'm going to go 60, 70, 80. For that, I'm going to go 100, 110, 120. And I'm just going to take my time, do it right. You guys don't need to see that. You kind of already saw how I did it before, but I'll bring you back once that's done and before I start doing the pistons. So stay tuned. One more thing I just thought of. Guys recommend on the mating surfaces here on your rear main, take a little bit of RTV, wipe it on your finger, and just give it the lightest coating of RTV on all those mating surfaces, just so that you can have a good little bond when that mates up with your block there. So I cleaned that up with some brake clean just to make sure I had a clean surface, and I'm going to just put the lightest coat all around those mating surfaces on here and on the block. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then, like I said, I'll bring you back once I've got everything torqued up. Alright, I got everything torqued down. Gave her a few rolls. Hopefully you can see this on camera here. She seems to roll pretty good. I don't really feel any catching points. Just like a nice even resistance all the way around. So, now let's see if we can get this bad boy timed. So I'm going to get my timing gear and everything else set up, and I'll show you how we're actually going to do that. So stay tuned. Alright, I've got my big breaker bar on the crank here. And what we're looking for here is, this is the number 1 cylinder. You can see I went ahead and I marked everything. So when the engine's flipped over, number 1 is going to be over here. So we need number 1 to be at top dead center. So we're just going to rotate this thing until she looks like she's peeked out. It's going to be somewhere right around there, because you can see the rod changes directions both times we're doing that, if that makes any sense. So that should be a top dead. So now I'm going to take a look at our timing gear, and there should be a mark on the bottom showing that we're at top dead. So you can see that A right there, we're really close. So we're going to go ahead and advance that this way just a scotch. So there, we can see that right there, that's in the middle, okay? So now, we're going to take our cam gear, slide that on there, and you can see there's a mark on the cam gear. Okay, so cam gear only goes on, it says front right there, so that goes out. That's where the mark is, and the cam gear only goes in one position on there because there's that notch, right? So it's hard to do with one hand, but we're gonna slide her on there. Come on, there we go. It's in place. So you can see this mark is supposed to be in line with that. So all I have to do now is put my bolt back in there and rotate my cam gear this way, and both my valves on the, well, I guess right here, on the number 1 cylinder should be closed at that point. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate it, get it in place, and then bring it back once we're done there. Alright, there you can see my marks are lined up there. So now we should be in time. Now I am going to double check that. I'm not going to turn the motor over anymore until I get it flipped over and get it all put back together. But once I get it flipped over, I'm going to pull off that valve cover just to make sure that we are where we need to be. So yeah, let me go ahead. I'm going to pop that gear back off and get my chain on. Alright, my timing assembly is back together here, so that's good. So now my top end and my bottom end are together. You also want to double check here that the face of this gear is parallel with the face of this gear, so you can take a straight edge, run it across the surfaces there, and then look in the middle. Whoop! and make sure that there's not any excessive gaps right there. So we're in good shape here. Otherwise you would have to shim accordingly, but I'm like within probably 2 thou there, so that's all good. Next thing we can do is try to check our end plate now that we have it all together, just to make sure that's in good condition. So let me grab a pry bar and I'll set you up on the camera and we'll see where we're at. Alright, so the book says you can have anywhere from 3.5 thou to 13.5 thou end play. Okay, so we're going to measure that by trying to shift the crank back and forth using a pry bar here. Just don't pry too hard. You don't want to break anything in there, you know, break off your pry bar or whatever. So, unfortunately, the smallest feeler gauge I have, I don't know if you can see that or not, but is 6 thou. So that puts us, you know, kind of right in the middle of our range there. So, what I'm going to do is pry this way, and I'm going to go on our thrust bearing surface there, right? So that's where I'm going to go. So when I pry that way, I am able, whoops, I'm on the wrong side. When I pry that way, I am able to barely fit my 6 thou feeler gauge in there. And I'm not on this side. Now when I go over here and do the same thing on the other side, I can fit it in here, but not here. You guys probably can't even see that move on camera. I can barely see it in real life. So that tells me my end play is right about where I need it to be. So we're in good shape there. I'm going to take you down and we're going to start assembling some more stuff. So let me get set up and I will show you where we're at. Alright, well, we're getting ready to get this thing all buttoned back up again. So I've already thrown my oil slinger on there. I've set my rear pan gasket, I guess that you call it like the rear main pan gasket, I don't know. Tell me what that's actually called, but I set it in there. I'm going to put RTV in it when I actually put the pan on. I've got to reinstall my oil pump. I've already put my gear back in. I'm going to reinstall my fuel pump right now, and then get my timing cover ready to be reinstalled. I'm going to have to, I'll show you this on camera, but I'm going to have to replace the seal on that, on the timing cover. But yeah, that's where we're at. So I'm going to go piddle with some things and I'll bring you back and I'll show you when we're doing the timing cover. Alright, well, I got my timing cover mostly cleaned up here. So I've driven out my old seal already, you can see here. I'm about to put in the new one. What I'm using to do that is this Harbor Freight kit. I've showed it in one of my other videos before too, but helps if I have it the right way. But basically, it comes with various size discs there that you use to line up with your seal, and this handy dandy little handle that screws on and off. So in this case, you line it up with the outside of your seal, so you got the right side. You want it just slightly smaller than the outside of your seal, and then you can use that to drive in your seals pretty easily. Because obviously you don't want to just beat on it with a hammer because you'll beat it up. So I'm going to put a little RTV around the outside of this, and I'll show you how I drive it in. So 1 second here, let me get this RTV going. Just put just a scotch around the outside here. Just to help make a good seal in there. So I'm assuming this cover is original from whenever the boat was, so could be a little porosity, could be a little bit of this, could be a little bit of that, but doesn't hurt to have a little bit of insurance. Yeah, that's all we're going to do. I'm going to just kind of set her in place for the second here. Put my lid back on my RTV. And I've got this set up on my vise here, so just sitting there, nice flat surface. And we're going to go ahead and give her a little bit of tappy tappy. Don't have to go too hard. See that? She's already just about seated in there. So give her just a little bit more. Yep, that's good. I'm going to go ahead and smear that RTV around there, just to give her a little bit of extra insurance. Alright, now that's ready to go. We're just about ready to put that timing cover on, so I will take you over to the engine. All right, so I've got my mating surface all cleaned up. I put RTV on the block, put my gasket on, put RTV around the gasket. Now I'm going to go ahead and put my pump cover on there, or timing cover. So I will slap that on there and show you once I get her on there. All right, timing cover is snugged up. Almost forgot to mention my alternator bracket and my timing, angle mark, whatever you want to call it there. Tell me what it's really called. Needed to go on that bolt right there. So when I tightened this up, I did it kind of in a star pattern, like a cross star. So I started there, went there, there, worked my way around twice to get it snugged up, just to make sure everything went on nice and flat. Looks like we got good gush everywhere from all of the RTV, so I should have myself a good seal in there. So we'll let that set up. Now we'll start working on our oil pan. So let me get that all cleaned up, and I'll bring you back as we're putting that guy on. Stay tuned. All right, pan is cleaned out and shiny as it's going to be. I just started mocking up my pan gasket there, and I realized I should not have put on this seal first, because it needs to slide under there, and there's a notch in there it goes into. So that's okay, it's not too late. I just peeled it off. The RTV hadn't set yet. So I'm gonna, and a good thing I didn't do the back side either yet. So we're in good shape. So I'm gonna go ahead and RTV all along both sides there, making sure to get a good amount inside that mating surface there. So we got a good seal where we have that intersection. And then I'm gonna go ahead and put my pan on. It's just gonna be a lot of wrestling around. So I'm gonna put RTV on both sides of this thing. I'm gonna put the gasket down, or put the RTV down, put the gasket down, put more RTV on, and then put my pan on. So I will bring you back if I run into any issues, but that's my plan as of right now. So stay tuned. Okay, oil pan is bolted on. Should have mentioned too, start at the middle, and then go out, 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 out. That way you don't get like a banana effect with your pan. Then and go slow. Do it in intervals. Go kind of like we did when we torqued up our mains in there. Start at the middle, work your way out, and just go intervals. Snug it up, work your way out, snug it up, work your way out, and keep going, keep going, keep going until it took me about 3 intervals to get there. And you could feel that each time the other ones, still had more to go. So now I'm pretty confident my pan is going to be flat. I got a good seal all the way around with all that RTV. So now we can start putting some more stuff together. I can actually put my starter back on. So I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to go ahead and put my spark plugs back in so I don't forget where they go. So I'll bring you back once that's done. All right, starter's back on, spark plugs are back in. So my next big task is going to be that harmonic balancer. And if you remember the previous video, earlier part of the video, I guess I should say, showed you there's a snapped off bolt in there. So I've started the process of soaking it in PB Blaster. I'm going to hit it again. I'm going to let that soak overnight. And I'm going to come back tomorrow and see if I can get that bad boy to pop loose. So we'll catch you back up tomorrow evening. Take care. All right, we're back 2 days later, actually. I've been hitting that with PB Blaster for the last 2 days. And it seemed like it's penetrating in because there wasn't anything left on the surface, so it must be leaking its way through. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and try to drill this. So I went ahead and I flattened that out with a Dremel tool to get it as flat as I could and put a little dimple in there with a punch. So now I'm going to try to drill it out. I've got an extractor kit. I'll walk over here and show you what we got. It's just a Harbor Freight one. I have used it before with good results, so hopefully it works here, but I'm trying the number 3, and the number 3 uses a 5/32 drill bit. So we're going to go ahead and set you up and see if you can watch me drill that, so just 1 second. All right, hopefully we'll be able to see that. So I'm going to go nice and slow, using a little bit of fluid on there to help lubricate. So I'm just going to hold it with my hand, but we'll see what we can do. So let's see. I actually don't think that drill bit's the sharpest. Let me try changing it out once and I'll bring you right back. 1 second. All right, so this is a brand new drill bit, so let's see if this does any better. I mean, I think that's a hardened bolt, so this could be a problem. Might have to go get a different drill bit altogether, but we'll see how this works. All right, that should be deep enough. Now we'll take you over to the vise and set you up and let's see how that extractor works. All right, let's test out this extractor. So I'm gonna go ahead and give her a little tappy tap with the hammer to get her seated. And we're gonna go ahead and try and, oh, it's already loose, look at that. Didn't even need the extractor. Wow, freed itself right up. You know, I found sometimes that just by drilling it out and taking some of the tension off of those, off the threads there, hollowing out that middle, that this stuff comes right out. Well, that was easy. Look at that. I was expecting much more of a fight. That's about the only thing that hasn't fought me on this machine yet. So, perfect. Well, now I can go ahead and get my balancer put back on. All right, stay tuned. I'll throw that bad boy back on there. All right, we're ready to put that balancer back on. So, off camera, I took some grease and smeared it around the inside of that oil seal there. That way it doesn't get boogered up as I'm pushing it in. I put some grease around the outside of the balancer where it slides through that oil seal there too. I also put some, if you can see, that's some anti-seize inside the balancer there, A, to help it slide on, B, so that it doesn't get welded on over time. So we're gonna go ahead and see if we can slide this bad boy on here. Probably gonna have to use the old bum whacker, but, yep, there we go. See if we can pop her back in there. All right, I think we're fully seated. Now I can bolt that bad boy back on, and then that's it. I can't put the pulley on yet. I still need to get the replacement bolt for that one, but I guess I can put 3 of the 4 on if I wanted to. Let's see, what else do I got to do here? I'll pop you off the tripod. We've got throw an oil filter on there. Got myself a nice Wix. Come over here. I can rehook up my battery cables and other electric to the solenoid and the starter there. So we got that. Other than that, we're about ready to flip the motor over and throw some oil in her. So let me tinker around and get that stuff done. I'll flip her over and I'll tell you what we're going to do for the oil. All right, we got our engine flipped over, and I actually went ahead and I put on my alternator belt there. So now we're going to throw some oil in this bad boy, make sure nothing leaks. So what I'm going to do is I got some, pick her up, 1540 heavy-duty diesel engine oil, and I'm going to throw a quart of Lucas in there just to give her some extra lubricity, a little bit extra protection there. So it holds 4 quarts total. So I'm going to go 1 quart of this, 3 quarts of the oil. So it's going to be thicker, but it'll give me good oil pressure and hopefully help lubricate those bearings pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Then I'm going to take the engine over, and it'll be about time to lift it off. So I'll show you when I'm going to lift it off. All right, I've got my engine in place here, and it's hooked up to my hoist right there. I've got the little bit of tension on it. So here, let me just adjust the camera. So what I'm going to do is come over here and loosen up my bolts on the engine stand here, and she should be free hanging. Pull the engine stand out of the way, set it on the floor, and slide the 2x4 or 4x4 under the front here to help support it. So we should be just resting. Actually, I'm going to put a 2x4 under here too, so that we're not sitting on the oil plug. Let me go grab that quick. 1 second. There we go. I actually grabbed a piece of OSB. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and loosen it up and set her down, and you'll get to watch in case it falls. Guess we're a little unbalanced there. That's okay. All right, let's get our stand out of the way. Now we'll turn him, and we will get him set on the floor. Here we go. I'm going to keep just a little bit of tension on the hoist there, but now I can go ahead and get my flywheel back on. So let me get you set up over there while I get that put back on. All right, here we are. I mistakenly called that a flywheel at the end of the last clip, but no, it's actually a flex plate. But anyways, the flex plate goes back on the crank. You can see here, there's a rusty spot in between these two holes. That corresponds with that spot right there. So I'm going to put it on the exact same configuration with these two holes, straddling that. I also marked the front here. You can see I put a marker line there, and a marker line on my spacer adapter, whatever you want to call it, for my slip yoke. And there is a mark here on the slip yoke that corresponds with the mark on there. So I know the way everything goes back together. So I'm going to go ahead and slide the flywheel back on and get it bolted on with our 2 screws, and then I will bring you back. All right, flex plate is installed. Now it was a little tight, so I had to do a little bit of a massaging, if you will, with my dead blow hammer, but I got her on, got the bolts torqued down, then I smacked her again a couple times to make sure she was seated good, and then torqued her again, and we're all set. I'm actually going to wait to put my slip yoke on. Reason being, I'm afraid I may have, burred up some of the splines on my impeller shaft out in the boat. So once I get the boat in here, I'm going to go ahead and just do a test slide on that and clock it a couple different ways to make sure it slides on as I'd like it to, so that I don't have the motor in the air and then have to worry about deburring that thing. So we're going to do that, but that won't be until the weekend. So next clip you're going to see is going to be me pulling the boat in and installing this engine on the boat. So hopefully that'll go smoothly, and then we can get everything hooked back up and give her a test fire. See if I screw anything up. So I'll bring you back on Saturday morning. So nighty night for now. All right, well, I have the boat in the garage, and I just checked my fitment of my slip yoke on the impeller shaft there, and it's a good thing I checked because there were some burrs. So I got that cleaned up as best I could with a Dremel tool, and I marked. You can see there's a yellow paint mark there, yellow paint mark there. I marked where the yoke best slides onto the shaft there, so I'm going to make sure to clock that when I'm putting the motor on. So now I'm going to go ahead and mount the slip yoke on the flex plate, and then mount the flex plate cover, and then we're ready to lift the engine back into the boat. So I'll bring you back when we're lifting the engine in. Stay tuned. All right, everybody, engine is in. Forgot to film it, but it was a bit of a wrestling match, but the combination of the winch and being able to tilt the engine front and back made it a pretty good process. I can't imagine doing this a different way. So I've got my motor mounts all tightened down. I'm about to take the chains off my lift here, get that out of the way. Then I'm going to get to bolting on my exhaust manifolds. So I'm going to show you that process once I get there. Alright, we're ready. So these are the gaskets I got. They're copper. They're supposed to be for surfaces with uneven mating surfaces, which we definitely have here. So these are right off Harden Marine's website. So these should do the job for sealing these. As far as I know, they've never tried these. So they're, like I said, solid copper. They've got like a nice protrusion around here to help it seat right around where the openings in the manifold are. Doesn't say to, but I'm still going to use some Ultra Copper Permatex on there to help seal these bad boys as best I can. The kit also came with these nice sealing washers too, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to coat both sides of this with the Permatex, slap it together, and snug it down. So I will bring you back once I've done the first side, so stay tuned. Alright, first side is bolted together, and I can tell you right now that these are fitting a lot better than the old ones are, so hopefully I don't have any leaks this time. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other side, and I'll show you what we're going to do next. Stay tuned. Alright, we got both manifolds installed. Now it's time to work on, I got to do water lines. I got to get my electric hook back up. If you remember, I labeled everything, so it should go back to pretty easy. Got to get my throttle cable hooked back up. And I think that's about it. So I'm going to get all that hooked up, make sure I didn't miss anything. Oh, then I got to get my battery hooked back up too. We'll do all that, and then we should be ready to do a test fire. So I'll bring you back when it's about that time. Alright, I think we have everything hooked up. I got my water lines hooked up, I've got my gas line hooked up, I've got my electric hooked up, throttle. I went ahead and I hooked up my battery cables. Smoke test, nothing smoking, so let's do a system check. Let's check our, let's see here, check our bilge pump. Working. Check our blower. Whoop. Well, working now. Making a weird noise. Alright, let's see if we have any crankage. Alright, we got crankage. Okay, so now we'll take it outside, get some water hooked up to it, and see if we can get it to fire. Well, almost forgot this step. I put my my bowl and the rest of my linkage back on my pump there. So now everything's back together. So now we will pull it out, hook up the hose, and see if we can get it to fire. So stay tuned. Alright, I've got my garden hose hooked up. You can see I got a little bit of a leak there, but it's because I got too small of a hose barb on that, but it'll be fine. Once I open it up, it'll work its way through. I'm going to go ahead and prime my carburetor through the vent there to fill up the bowls so it's not, running dry. I'm actually using some two-stroke pre-mixed gas just to give the top end a little bit of lubrication since it's been dry for a while there and I don't want to crank it dry. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll show you when we're going to try to fire it. So stay tuned. Alright, here we go. So we're going to fire it up. Assuming it fires, then we'll go down and we'll open our valve to get the water flowing through the engine. So here goes nothing. I've already set the choke, and we'll see what happens. Well, hopefully you can hear me, but she's running. Everything's good. Take a look here. We got 70 pounds of oil pressure, so that's real good. I just shut her off and I pulled the dipstick, and there's no water in the oil, so that's good. So we're just gonna let her run for a little bit here and let her, kind of work through itself. So I'll bring you back in a little bit. Alright guys, well, we ran her through a couple of cycles, let it run for 5 or 10 minutes or so, shut her off, let her cool down, run her a little bit more. Engine temperature came up to about 180 on the hose here, and the oil pressure was holding steady at like 65-70 pounds, so that's great. Next thing we got to do is actually get it in the water and give her a test run in the water, because I will have to adjust my my packings down there for my impeller shaft once we get in the water, get that set just right, and then I will have to take her for a test trip. So that isn't going to be today. That'll be in the next couple days, hopefully. So I will see you out on the water. So until then, signing off. All right, guys, we're actually back the next day. We got the boat on the water. She's floating for the first time here, so I'm checking my packing down here, and I am getting a little bit of runoff. Not bad, so we're in pretty good shape, so I'm just going to snug that up quick. Then we're going to take her out for a rip. So I'll bring you back once I got her all snugged up. All right, we got our packing tight. It's not leaking anymore, so we're going to fire it up and just idle her around for a little bit, get some heat into her, and then we'll take her for a spin. So here you'll be able to see the startup. I'll cut you off until we're done idling, then once we bring her up to speed, I'll bring you back in. All right, we got a little heat in her, so now we're going to try to take her up on plane. All right, we've been tooling around here for a little bit on plane, doing about 35, so now we're going to give her the onions and see what happens. We just did a lap around. We got some good heat into her, and we're gonna check the oil pressure now. We're still holding pretty strong at 60, so that's looking pretty good. I think everything's great. We'll go ahead and just do one more lap here, and then we'll see where we're at. So I will bring you back in a few minutes. All right, guys, we did a few laps around the lake there at full bore. Everything's going good, runs smooth, accelerates nice and hard, planes out easy. It's holding oil pressure, nothing's leaking, so I think we did our job. So that's going to conclude this video. So appreciate you guys watching. I've actually just recently reached 1,000 subscribers, so it's all thanks to everybody out there, you know, watching the videos, liking, subscribing, that sort of thing. So to keep this going, you know, please spread the word, and I'll make more of this. So till then, signed off.